So I've come through this world of like very much putting my physical, beauty, my sexuality on the forefront and consumerizing, creating a consumer product with that.
Yeah.
And I also, during that time, kind of started doing my own work through some, I call them awakenings now, but they felt like mental breakdowns at the time. And so that kind of started me off in doing my own work, my own inner work. And as I did that, I really realized that I had stepped into this role from a very young age of becoming this really masculine personality that I wanted to have as my protector when I was younger, and then through my life, through my dating career a lot of the time, and kind of pulled that through with me to now. And a few years ago, after doing a lot of that work and having a podcast called The Magic Hour that I explored with a lot of different experts and psychologists and therapists of all different types, doctors and health, gurus and practitioners, how to understand my own philosophy in life. I came to this realization that I really want to be able to help my community, which is my following. And I've been lucky enough to amass a really large following. And a lot of those people, as you can imagine, because of the career I had come through, are men. Yeah. And they're men who are looking to me maybe for the sexuality piece of it, and they're coming for the beauty and the sexuality piece of it. But the thing I was noticing most in my personal life with men in my sphere, and because I happen to have this thing about me that I don't know exactly what it is, but I tend to have really deep, intimate relationships with men in my life that are not necessarily on a romantic, physical level. Mm-hmm. And that's always been easy for me. I grew up with 5 sisters, no brothers. So maybe I was looking for all my brothers out there. I don't know what it was. But that's always been like easy for me to kind of like make that clear so that it never gets, I shouldn't say never, because there's been times it gets weird, but but I'm able to kind of confront that when it happens. And so I think the men that have come and stayed for as long as they have on the platforms that I offer on social media are starting to understand that I'm now attempting to be a bridge between sexuality and I don't love to use this word in the world of social media just because it's hard, but I know here on your platform, Devin, it's a different world, but between sexuality and spirituality, which shouldn't be separated. And so I'm hoping to help be a bridge back to understanding that those two things are innately attached. And so that's maybe a place we can start. I'll leave it there because that's a lot already.
Beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate hearing more about that. And as I've dove into your page, I've understood, in a sense, a little bit of your journey. So I appreciate hearing more. And I just specifically love that mission that you're working with, because for me, that's the work that I do a lot as well with men, is helping them understand that bridge between sexuality and spirituality, which to me, at the core of it, being spiritual is the biggest thing that we can do here on earth is to be human and to be ourselves, whatever that looks like. And what I really honor and appreciate about you in this realm is you've looked at your following and you've done all of this work and had these awakenings and all of these pieces through your journey, and now you're really helping men. And I really appreciate that, because from my experience, when I go and talk to men about sexuality, a lot of times they're like, what are you doing? But you have a beautiful woman like yourself, and you're like, hey, you want to learn how to do that? And guys are like, let's go. And so I think it's really beautiful to be able to share, and like you're part of what, at least you're saying in your bio, helping to awaken the modern man. Like that's so beautiful, because from my work and from what I've seen, the leadership connection between helping have embodied healthy sexuality can channel that energy. And so you've recently launched your new podcast, or your show, which I really love, and just looking at the first couple of episodes, it seems super cool, because you're having the most recent one, you had 2 individuals on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this show is, I call it it's like a social media based talk show, because it's very visual. We filmed it like a film,
Yeah.
And so I have my co-host on it. We call him the Chap.
Yes.
And then we'll interview. Sometimes it'll just be him and I talking about some topic that we think is pertinent for our audience, for my audience. And then most times we'll have a guest on that we're interviewing. And most of the time those guests are experts in men's work, or they're dating coaches. A lot of them are beautiful women, because we know that that plays well on my channel, and also because I happen to have a lot of beautiful women in my life, which is I'm very lucky. That happen to also be experts in this field, because I've been, working in this way for a few years now. So I guess that's I'm really appreciating how the universe is, doing what it does and attracting those people into my sphere. So I might as well use the platform I have to elevate all of it. And that show is called Mercedes and the Chap. We call it Match for short, MATCH. It is where I've taken what I did in my last show, which is still, lives, and I'm not recording any more of those episodes, but the information and the depth that we would go in, that show was called The Magic Hour. I'm taking all that information and a lot of those same experts, and then bringing it into this more digestible place that I think is where, like, my platform, the people I'm speaking to, can resonate better. And it's really difficult to take that, as you know, Devin, because you're taking these concepts that are huge, like how to be in integrity, like how to become whole, like how to figure out your purpose, how to, and then that, I don't want to call it dumbs down, but it really gets all the way down into little minute pieces, which look more like, how do you call in the woman of your dreams? How do you become the one? How do you create attractiveness in your own body? Like, what are these things? And of course, that it's about, well, honing your own sexual energy, or just understanding what creative energy is as a whole, and how you can keep that and embody it, and then use it on purpose, meaning living your life on purpose, in your purpose. So it's all big concepts that we're really working hard to put into a bite-sized format, like on social media, and then also make it digestible and actionable for the audience. So that's the goal. I don't know if I'm going to do it exactly right, but I'm attempting it.
Well, I love that, because you're speaking to them. You have such a big following, and you're speaking to so many individuals who may be coming to this for the first time, and you're like, okay, well, you're going to tell me to channel my sexual energy? What does that mean? Or you're going to tell me, hey, are you living your life on purpose? And they're like, huh? And so I really appreciate how you're talking about, like, distilling it and bringing it to a place where it can be understood across the masses, which in a sense, that's going to help awaken or uplift and raise the vibration of us collectively. And when we really distill it down, because at the end of the day, there's so much confusion around a lot of these topics, even in the men's work world and these realms where we're doing the work, because the concepts are so far out. But like what you said, there's actually the micro-sized pieces, those simple things that we do in our life in every single way, is really where it transforms. At least it's transformed my life. And so I love that you're really simplifying it, because when it is in that simple form, doesn't matter who the person is, super far along the path or just new to it, it can really bring us to that space. So thank you for continuing the work. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate your appreciation. Thanks for seeing me.
So I'm curious, what brought you to the place of starting the Magic Hour, which then led to Match? Like how did that transpire?
So I started the Magic Hour with one of my girlfriends, Jade, who had worked with me at Bellator for a long time. So we kind of became sisters over I think it was like 5-6 years, something like that. We worked together. And I mean, we traveled the world together. We traveled, and when you say travel with another person, it means you're like with them every second. You know what I mean? So you really get to know this person and bond. And we had gone through a lot of our own journey through the time we'd known each other and worked together. And then we kind of went off into our own worlds. And during that time is when I started having these, for me, it was, I want to give this to you and to your audience, just because I think it's an important thing to be said out loud, because I don't think it's something that is often processed or like brought to light. for me, it was like, as a woman, I spent a lot of my years really focused on finding the right person to be in relationship with. And I think that, like, part of my work going forward in the future, I'm writing a book right now, and I have 2 other books that I already have in my mind, but I think the third one is going to be on this particular topic. It's about understanding how our hormones, especially like in my case, what the female sex hormones look like, and how those drive our mentality when we go into the world. And when we go into the world and we start saying, well, what do I need to do here? You know, what's the most important thing? We don't even get all the way down to like how to serve others, how to be in, you know, what I would call purpose now. We are being driven by our sex hormones, and this is for men and women both. But part of that for me instructed me that I need to find a partner who would be good to mate with, essentially, right? This is coming from private place. This is not even conscious particularly. I just knew I was attracted to guys and I want to have a boyfriend. And then I had my own, you know, issues, abandonment wounds, or whatever else that made me get into relationships that weren't necessarily healthy all the time. So before I understood any of that, I was just being driven by this need to commune with another being, like, and get into these romantic relationships. And when I met who is my husband now, when I met him very early on, I knew that this was going to be the person I was going to be with, at least, you know, for as long as I can imagine at this point. Yep. And this was the person that would, for what my mentality was at that point, or consciousness level was at that point, it was the person that was going to fill this void, which I put in quotes because that's obviously not how things work. But that was what I was looking for, right? That's what that primal piece of me was like, cool, like, okay, cool, we got this. Now we have this. That's settled. And this is the part I really want to give to you and your audience. Once that settles, and this happens for a lot of women, and I didn't know this at the time, but now that I've spoken to so many women about this, it's like a thing. Once that is figured out and that settles, suddenly there's this stillness that occurs. And especially if you get into a relationship that's safe enough for it to settle, like I'm talking about, all the demons come up, because now that the thing you've been thinking about and has been on the top of your consciousness for all this time is kind of done and taken care of. Now all the shit that's been being stuffed down can rise to the surface. And that was where I had really my second breakdown of my life, but maybe the most important one, where I had all this panic, anxiety, depression, all this stuff I had never experienced before started coming through. And it came through in physical ways, symptomatically. It came through, obviously mental, the anxiety, the thoughts and all that. And it was just hell. It was absolutely terrible. I mean, I was like in a full panic attack, mode for like months at a time. I mean, like, it didn't go away. And during that time, of course, like, went to a zillion doctors, like, what is wrong with me? For some reason, when we have onset like of anxiety or panic, we immediately don't think like it could be my thoughts, because that's just not the way we think, naturally. We think something's wrong with me. I have some medical issue. Like, yeah. So
help me, please.
Yeah, somebody just tell me what to do. Like, what is wrong? And I wanted a diagnosis. Like, I literally wanted someone to be like, you have a tumor in your brain, Mercedes. That's what it is. Like, what, like, just make this storm of like thoughts and panic and all the things that come with that stop, at least. And it wouldn't even stop it, right? If someone told you have a brain tumor, now at least I can focus on something else. But this is just, as we know, anxiety is just this like storm of creative thoughts where you're taking yourself down your own self-made rabbit hole. And that's terrifying because it never ends, because we can think forever. Mm-hmm. So that keeps going. Yeah. Yeah. So that kicked me off. Thankfully, my husband has his own history with this type of battle. And he was, could see some of the things I was going through. So I had that on my side of like, it wasn't like, whoa, what's wrong with you? I had someone in my corner to not look at me like I was going crazy, because that was what I thought was happening. I was sure of it. Yep. After all the doctors told me, no, all your levels are fine. You're, like, your nutrition's good. Your hormones are fine. Like, here, take some Prozac, and And I said no to the Prozac, you know, whatever types of Prozac SSRIs that they offer.
Yep.
And I had to say no several times. The only reason I said no was because something innate, you know, something intuitive inside me told me that wasn't the way. And I am also a control freak that I think was on my side in that moment. Like, I need to figure this out. You know, I don't want to take something that I can't figure things out.
Yeah.
That was the way I thought about it. And then my husband too was saying, he wasn't my husband yet at the time, but you know, we were going in that direction. That, hey, try yoga, you know, he had other options. And he also, because he didn't look at me like I was crazy. So finding that community, starting with him, was a huge turning point for me. And then also that invited me to like find my community, which really was where I opened books and started finding my community and the mentors I was reading and the research I was doing. And then talking about it out loud eventually, and realizing that most people are having or have had this experience to some degree, or will, and then they, you know, they at least can understand it when it happens for them. So that is what kicked me off into birthing the search for what was happening inside of me. And then Jade was also going through her own stuff. She was having children at that time while I was going through this, but she had her own journey of kind of coming to in these ways and was doing her own search. And so she came to me and said, hey, why don't we do something together? Maybe we can start a podcast. And then we birthed the Magic Hour, MAJIC, Mercedes and Jade. So from there, that's what happened. So we wanted to do, because we were already doing our own work, we wanted to interview people who we were reading and were inspired by, and all the experts that like seemed like they knew something we really needed, because or we wish we would have had going through those really turbulent times. And that's who we called in, and it was absolutely amazing. The people who we got on that show, like, just incredible
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that journey. And sure. I can relate so deeply personally with the men that I work with. And I love that the way that you phrased it, because at that primal level, almost everyone, I don't know someone who has not experienced this, where they're looking for that person, that relationship, so we can procreate. Because like you said, that's not on the conscious level. Our cells in our body are constantly expanding and creating, and that life force wants to also procreate too.
Yeah.
So it's so real, and it drives both men and women in very different ways. And I remember for me, my journey started when I was 20. I nearly overdosed, and it changed everything in my life. And so when I really took a step back at that time, I started seeing the world in such a different way. And I was like, wow, this literally is just like a meat market. Like I'm not saying it in a bad way. It's just like everyone is looking for that. Everyone, and underneath it, on the spiritual level, it's that connection, the desire for connection, that desire for closeness. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because there's so much, like you said, the focus of like, oh, I'm looking for the one. And again, it's that external look. And then if we are with that person who we're choosing to go in that route with, then now that I am not looking out there, and now I get to be with myself, and that person's being that mirror, and I get to feel and see all these parts of myself, whether it's stuff that I picked up from when I was a child, or school, or young relationships, or whatever it may be that has influenced how I relate to other people. That's really when the work happens. And I love how you referenced being in a safe container, because working with men, and both of us having this audience of being directing it towards men, safety is one of the biggest pieces that we, as the masculine pole, or like the man, can provide, so the feminine can be safe, so you can relax, so your nervous system can be safe if children and that aspect of the biology wants to be created, or just a relationship is desired to be created, and having that safety. And so, yeah, thank you for that. It really, it highlights so many aspects, especially with men, in these realms, because the lack of trust that a man would have has to do with him, doesn't have to do with you. And if a man is insecure because he's with a beautiful woman and she's confident in what she's doing, and she's really embodied saying, hey, I'm doing this because I want to serve as a bridge and offer this, and this is what I am in, this is my body, and I'm going to use this and make sure that I'm subjectively choosing what I'm doing, that's on him. That's his insecurity. And you're highlighting, as we've been talking about this through this thread, how it all comes back to ourselves. Mm. And what I really hear from you is that you're really grounded and clear in what you're doing and what you're offering. And you guys are not, like you said, you're not just, oh, we recently got together. Like, you've been through this journey with him, which is really beautiful. Yeah. And I want to just say thank you and I commend you, because it's really beautiful to know that. And because when I started off the live, I shared that I think I found you after doing a podcast or doing a live with Dominic last year.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when I found you and Jade. And just knowing the journey that I've seen in that whole time, I didn't have the exposure to years before when you were sharing about your husband. So it really, I think for the audience and the people listening, it highlights the importance that as men, the things that come up are on us, because you're choosing your husband. So
yes.
There's nothing else that needs to be seen. Like, as a man, if I'm not like my partner, she chooses me. She doesn't give me, there's not been a single thing throughout our entire time together that has given me any reason to doubt. So anything that comes up is on me. And I think that that's across the board, that not enough men are taught as young boys, and the stories that are given to us is that women are unfaithful, because look at all of this, the stories from Hollywood and all these other things, but it's equal sides. And again, that's happening because there's stuff that people aren't looking at, whether it's a man or a woman. And you ask the clear question, if those things are coming up, or if you have something to hide, what is that within inside of myself or yourself that I'm not revealing, that I'm not being transparent about? Because that's actually an opportunity for more connection, for more intimacy when we lean into that. And so,
yeah, I think I think what we're talking about here is really clearing out where, to use some psychology terms, but a codependency versus an interdependency, and getting clear on your, whether man or woman, really, if you are in something that you feel you don't trust. This is a journey that I'm still on, by the way. So I'm not high and mighty on this in any means. I still deal with this on a daily basis. Trusting someone else, like you're saying, has really absolutely nothing to do with the other person. The other person might do things that are shady and shitty and whatever, but the thing about you, the part about you that is trusting or not, has to be looked at as your responsibility. So if I go into a relationship and they're doing something that doesn't make me feel safe, then I need to trust myself that when that happens, I first of all clearly communicate that doesn't make me feel safe. Here's what I need in order to feel safe. And then if that doesn't get met, then I leave or make a move here. And that is those things that I'm doing are trusting myself to do that. So the trust is about trusting the action that happens in here rather than whatever action is happening out there that someone else is performing. And I think swapping that in your mind is so powerful, because until you do, you believe that someone else, you're a victim. Someone else's actions are creating my circumstance. And it's like, no, dude, it's you. You keep showing up for their action. Why are you doing that? You're showing up the same way and expecting them to act different. You haven't set a standard. You haven't you haven't said, here's the things for me that make me want to stay. And then you haven't left when they don't meet those things. So, if you haven't done any of that, then you are a victim. You are
exactly
in that world. And then to speak to the point about where you can become more. So I guess just to pull in that piece of what codependency looks like, and then codependency is a whole huge topic, of course, but just the idea that when you are reacting to someone else's actions and believing that you can't ever be safe and you can't ever trust without them being and acting a particular way, you haven't taken into consideration your side of the street, like you're talking about here. You haven't done your work. You haven't sat with yourself and said, well, where am I actually being unsafe and acting out, hypothetically, right? Acting out the things that they are, that I see as, I can see from my side of the street, I see looking at them that they are unsafe, untrustworthy, etc., whatever you want to put onto them. When have you pointed that back at you first? So like,
Exactly.
okay, if you're triggered out here and you go, you did that thing that made me feel unsafe. You flirted with that person, whatever it is. Okay, cool. Totally get that. That's a trigger and might not be good or nice or any of those things, but just stop, like slow down. This is what I tell guys every day, like just slow down, because we get reactive, like I got to do something about that. Well, that's
Yep.
there, and it has not going to do anything if you do something about that. What you do is in here. So if you can slow down and go, okay, where is it inside my body that I am unsafe? Like literally, what is it in me that I don't trust, that I need to consider is not trustworthy? And it's not like, well, I'm always flirting with girls. Maybe if that's something you're doing, then definitely you need to look at that for sure. And that's an obvious one. But maybe it's like, I don't slow down with myself and ask what I really need. Or I don't slow down with myself and consider the reaction that I'm having that seems completely unreasonable sometimes to the situation, or that's coming from an immature, frozen, old place, a young place in me that has not gotten the chance to mature into the man that I really want to be, my true adult self. And wherever those places are the places that you're not feeling trust in here. And you're not feeling trust because you're not showing up for his standards, the inner child, we can call it, or, you know, the small self, or the inner demon. Even people like to demonize it. But if we can slow down with those parts and show up for those parts and create trust between those parts, like, hey buddy, like legit, this is how I talk to my inner child. I see her, and there's a lot of different parts of her. She looks different in some different lights, right? But the darkest part right now, I'm in abstinence in relationship, going on a couple months now. It's a whole nother story, which is interesting to do in relationship. And I'm living in a separate level of my house. Like I'm in a full blown like silent retreat situation in my own house. But one of the things I'm doing is communing with this really the darkest part of myself, this little girl who has been, and for your male following who can understand it for themselves, you know, the little boy in yourself that has been suppressed so deep down that they become this subconscious and insidious part of you that pops up when you really don't want it. And usually like when you're drinking, or, you know, when you don't have the capacities at your, you know, your faculties to keep it stuffed down. It pops up usually as angry, violent, resentful, hurtful, you know, and then of course comes with a ton of pain as the consequence of those ways that it reacts in the world. And so for me, when I commune with this part of myself, I see her, she's literally dingy because she's been shoved in a corner. Like I see her just disheveled and like, you know what she kind of looks like right now. And I'm sure she's going to, I hope, transform as I like reparent her and I coddle her and hopefully help her and build trust with her. But right now she looks like the girl on the Ring that comes out of the TV. Like that's terrifying. Terrifying is the right word, right? And she is terrified. And she's this part of me that I'm afraid of, like the part of me that's got some sort of consciousness. I'm afraid of sometimes even talking to her because she's so dark, because she's been not looked at for so long. You know what I mean? She's been in the shadows for so long, like festering, really. Like that's why I say like the girl in the Ring. And as I commune with this part and I allow myself, my adult, or I call it like my true self, my conscious self, right, to go in and make time to touch her, to make contact with her. And like, I literally picture myself. And like I said, your following can picture this with their inner child, whatever their inner child looks like. By the way, it doesn't have to look like a little boy. It could look like anything, right? I make time to have that communion with her. Like, babe, come out, like sit on my lap. I know this sounds silly, but you know, sit on my lap and let me like hold you and tell me what it is that you really want to be heard for. And sometimes she's violent, like she straight up bites me sometimes. You know what I mean? She's an angry little one. And so as I pull on these things though, and of course I'm journaling it, breathing through. I'm crying a lot of the time through it. I'm feeling the emotions that she didn't feel safe to feel.
Yeah.
And as I do that, it creates a bridge of trust. It creates a place that she feels like, okay, like maybe I can exist, because she didn't believe she could for all this time, all this time. Like, can you imagine the decades and decades of time she's been sitting in that corner, like just in darkness? Like, that's not good. One of my favorite things is to be in sunshine and to be in the light, and she hasn't gotten that. So it's going to take some time, and this is the slowing down process I'm talking about. It's going to take time, energy, emotional movement through my body, which is, trust me, the thing I run from more than anything, which is why I can, I think, relate to men more than anything. We got that in common. Feelings is hard. It's scary. It's not, it should be natural for me, natural for me, it seems, but it isn't, because I became the man that I needed in my life at a young age. And I thought that meant that I'm not supposed to feel, I'm supposed to be the container, I'm supposed to be, and so that's why this little girl is shoved in this dark corner.
Yeah.
So the point is here, right, that we're building this trust inside first, because once we can do that with the parts of us that we've shoved away, we get to step toward our wholeness, toward our integrity. And that's what I really believe is like the word that I don't have any tattoos, but like tattoo it on our bodies, and like just that is what I believe we're here to do, is remember our wholeness, remember our integrity. That was a lot. Thank you for holding space for that.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks for being willing to share that and have that vulnerability, and let the people who are watching or do see you see that, because that's something that isn't talked about a lot, especially in the mainstream levels, to have a relationship with our inner child and to welcome them back in after all of the suppression and hiding and stuffing away that has happened. And it's very common, in at least especially in the Western society, US society, like men are told, suck it up, don't cry, don't do this. And whether it's a man or a woman who's growing up and they don't have that safety, we do what we need to do to survive, which is beautiful, because we have, talking about that primal consciousness that's wanting to procreate, we also have this innate consciousness in us that gets us to where we are. And so it's beautiful that we've made it through, and people who have been through intense things, that we've survived to get through that. And what you're highlighting is that when we turn back inwards, and when we have, maybe it's a relationship that comes into our life that can allow us that spaciousness to look at it, or we just decide, if we don't have that, people who may not have that relationship can still do this work. They can still become that for themselves. And so when we go inward, there's so much power that comes from that, because we're actually welcoming them back home. And what I love, the connection between that with one of your offerings that you have, is awakening the king within. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about these archetypes, the king or the queen is the one who is taking care of that whole world inside of us, right? And I know you know this from doing this work, both with men and women and with yourself. So when we actually take care of that little child, that inner child, like I was called D-Dog. So when I talk to my little child, I'm like, hey, D-Dog, like I check in with him pretty much every day. And when I have met those parts of him where he didn't even want to be seen and he wanted to just run, like as time's gone on, now it's like there's this conversation that we have, and it allows me to not let him run the show. And I think that's what happens for a lot of us, is that little child is running the show. So we are stubborn, we are biting, whether it's emotionally or physically, and we're trying to keep that distance, rather than what you're doing. You're doing the work, you're welcoming your little girl back in, so that way both of you or all of you can be there together, and then we can serve and live on purpose in the world, which I love. So thanks for sharing that, and really helping people to see that it is possible. And it's actually, from my experience, and I'm assuming it is for you, it's actually really empowering and uplifting when we do that, because now that piece is not always there. And then we get to really focus on other things, like enjoying, celebrating life and living, because it's such a gift.
And I think that's a critical piece you bring in, is that you get to live from a place that and I don't want to say that part is never there. I really like to picture that part as a passenger on the ship, which is the whole you, or however,
Yeah.
whatever you call the whole you. I had a dream the other night. I dream journal almost every morning. I have very vivid dreams, always have.
Yeah.
And that's been one of my biggest ways to process is through my dreams.
Yep.
Highly recommend it. I had a dream that essentially, I didn't see that I had to journal the dream in order to figure this out, but there was this pair of pants that was presented to me in the dream, and they were out. This is going to make sense, I swear, at the end of this.
Gotcha.
Dreams are always strange, right?
Yes.
The pants was sewn together with all these patchworks of different colors of these beautiful brown fabrics of different shades, all different types of textures and pattern and sparkle and, like all the things on these different pieces of fabric. And the pair of pants was a whole pair of pants, right? But you could see all the sewing patchwork marks. You could see how all these pieces came together. And through, journaling it, the dream, the pair of pants symbolized to me my wholeness. Like this pair of pants was immaculate in my dream. It had a sensation that came with it that was like, like it was just stunning. This pair of pants that was so whole, and it fit me perfectly. I mean, these were made for me. You know what I mean? These pants, I know it's so silly, but these pants were made for me to not just wear, but they were born for me. Like this thing was created, constructed by each stitch and every piece of fabric that was chosen were all these pieces that were made for me to don and walk in the world feeling like a piece of art, literally, because I get to wear this piece of art. And I think when we see ourselves as, I love to see it as a ship because it's so easy for so many to imagine, and maybe because it's masculine, I don't know, but so is the pants, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Symbols for me. But the ship is this obvious container that you get to captain, and the you that gets to captain it is the part of you that I call my adult self, because I think it's really critical to see it as the adult self, where the adult self is the parent that you get to give to your children. Maybe you have children in the future or not, or you get to use. The adult is the artist that creates. Creative energy is the same energy we use to make children. Same energy is sexual energy. Same energy is energy. Energy is energy, and it's what we use to go out in the world and serve our purpose, to create our art, to alchemize our pain, to do the things, right? That captain is the one who goes out and does that by driving the ship. And until we recognize that there is the adult self, the part of us that has the discerning factor, I call it the king in Awakening the King Within, but it's the one who sees over the realm and says, I'm in the throne, I'm in the captain seat, and I'm the one who's going to dictate the direction we go. Now, all the patchwork play a part. All the patchwork in my pants play a part, right? And otherwise, I'd have a hole there. Or, part of the ship would not be operating. Maybe there would not, the decks wouldn't be swabbed, or the galley wouldn't be full of food, or whatever the thing, would not be nourished the way the boat needs to be in order to run properly without all the members that are in there. But it is the captain who has the responsibility to what I call remember, or in other words, put into alignment all the parts so that the ship runs well and at its best. Those parts are all supporting the running of the entire ship, right? And the captain, in this case, is the voice for the shipmates. And that's critical. So if your inner child, this part that sometimes acts immaturely because of the traumas that they experienced, where they got frozen at the age that they experienced that trauma, the initial trauma. So that might be like 2 years old, what I mean? Where there is not a cognitive ability to respond to an emotional trigger. That part of you doesn't have any other way to do it besides kicking, screaming, throwing things, hitting things. I mean, it's coming from a very primal part where it just is trying to survive, right? Like trying to protect. It has to be a passenger on your ship consistently, because it doesn't go away, right? No matter what. As much as we tried to stuff it down, it doesn't go away.
It doesn't go.
But when we can be the captain and recognize it as a critical part of our ship, that without we'd be leaking, we'd be sinking, right? When we can recognize it as this critical part and be its voice. And that's the thing. Be the one who stands up for its standards.
Yeah.
Be the one who protects it for what it needed but never got. Be the one that reparents it and goes back, reparents it. That sounds, I don't know why it sounded weird when it came out of my mouth, but reparents it and goes back and says, you know, what do you need today to, if they're being reactive, it's really a very important time to go and look at it.
Yeah.
What do you need today in order to feel heard, in order to be seen, and in order to be protected? And I bet you when you go back in there, because you've been thinking, that's an immature part, it doesn't deserve to be noticed and recognized and stood up for. But when you go back and realize what it's really asking for, it's a vital need that it's asking for. It is one of the 10 emotional needs that is needed. And I don't know if I can spout this off the top of my head, but I'm going to try really quick because I'm writing about it in my book right now. But let's see. So the emotional needs that we all need, right? Like in relationship and to be, and so when I say in relationship, that's in romantic relationship, in partnership, in work with another person, in our relationship with our friends, family, our inner child who is our family, you know what I mean? Like the closest one to us. In relationship with all these pieces of ourselves, we need to consider, are we meeting all of the emotional needs? So that's acceptance, validation. Let's see how I can pull these all together because I'm trying to make an acronym out of them, but it's not going to work. Let's see. So there is a piece that is, God, I should just pull them up so I have them for you, and then we can make sure we cover all of them because I know I'm going to miss, I'm already pulling only 5 to my head.
That's all good.
Do you mind?
Yeah, please look them up. I love this. And while you're looking it up, what I want to just really highlight that you're talking about, specifically since we're, in a sense, talking to men, it's the responsibility that we have for ourselves. And you were talking about integrity. Integrity means to be whole. So rather than trying to stuff those parts away and say, no, you're not here, when we welcome that little boy or that little girl in, and like you said, they're welcome, they know that they're a part of it, rather than when they were younger and they weren't welcomed and they weren't allowed. When we allow that back in, but we don't let them drive the ship. Because if we let a little child drive the ship, that's when we either sink or we crash. But when we welcome them in, and the captain's like, oh, you need some of this? Okay, let me speak for you, let me express, which is, again, that responsibility, bringing back to the transparency, looking at myself. And then when we do that, that's on us to have the standards. Do we have these standards? Am I making sure that I'm being met, or am I not doing that? So.
Absolutely, yes, and that is what integrity, is all about. It's just another word for wholeness. It's about remembering the parts. I think I don't know if you follow Eric Godsey, but he's been a big mentor of mine. And one of the things he posted, I think even just yesterday, was about the word remembering, meaning to bring back people of the village that essentially that were lost. So these parts of ourselves, these members of our psyche, is the way I look at it. We're putting them back into order, into alignment. That is what remembering is. And that's why when someone says, you're already whole, you already are, which I totally believe, that means it's not that you're not already that. It's about you remembering it. So when you recognize that those pieces are what make you whole, and they're all part of you, and you accept them, like you're saying, back into their place, and you can give them a voice. Now, you being the true you, the adult you, the part of you that speaks for all the others inside of you, you get to live in wholeness. And that's a incredibly, I think that's the journey that we're all on. And I don't think that many people get to attain it. And that was something you brought up earlier, Devin, was what inspired in me was the idea of the privilege to do this type of work, because it is absolutely a privilege. Like when we aren't living from a place of survival needs, we get to start facilitating emotional needs. And this is what we're talking about. And so those emotional needs, I've got them here. Affection, acceptance, validation, autonomy, security, trust, empathy, prioritization, connection, And then I have these are the only ones I've written on so far. As you can see, that's why I don't have the last one in yet.
That's beautiful.
But yeah, so these pieces are like, we can understand that it's because we're always like, well, how am I going to get those needs met outside of myself with someone else? Da, da, da. Yes, definitely make sure you're getting that stuff, but you'll only know how much of that you need in relationship if you meet it inside you first, because otherwise you're going, I need all the, connection every moment of the day, or I need all the affection, or I need all the validation. And your partner's like, bro, like you need to slow, like this is too much. I can't do all of this for you. Like I have to do my own stuff too. Like I have a job,
Exactly. Yeah.
Or whatever. I got to do my own soul searching and everything else. And we feel really consumed. I think for a lot of men, that's an important part. Not all men, but I think a lot of men have felt the enmeshment from their parents who did not heal these wounds in themselves. And then therefore they feel like they need to be the one to give all the validation and all the support and all the connection that their, not just their caregiver needed, but now that their romantic partner needs, because that's likely they called in, someone who continues to mirror that wound until they heal it. And when that happens, they have no space to do their own work, so they don't feel free. And I think most men would resonate with that idea of like, I don't feel free. I can't figure out, how to feel free, but still be in relationship. So they run and hide and avoid. And it's like, we got to just slow down and recognize what it is in ourselves. Also ask our partners to please recognize what it is in yourself first, so that when you come to the relationship, we get to have something that doesn't look like codependence. And, someone comes in being, I'm going to be dependent on you to validate me in order to feel whole, and instead we come and we're whole already because we've recognized our whole-ness, like we've talked about this whole time, and we bring to the table the whole self. No one fills our voids. Like, I hear people say that, like, no one is going to fill anything for you. Like, they're not going to complete you. They aren't the piece. They're just going to be able to come side by side and cruise with you.
All the way. Yeah. So I think we probably have about a minute left. I don't know if Instagram is going to cut us off at an hour. So I would love that. I think that's such a beautiful culmination point, just tying everything that we've talked about, that wholeness. What's the last thing that you would love to just share and leave with the people who are watching this, specifically to the men? Like, what's that one piece that you feel like you would love to share?
It would just be to tap in to that piece of you that you feel keeps coming up over and over, that you cannot dilute, that you cannot drink away or escape in any way. That piece of you that keeps asking you to look at it. This is the part that is your guide. It's trying to, and sometimes through painful measures, point you in the direction you need to look and seek and understand first, and to go into that and just stay with that. There's a part of us that guides us that, if we're not paying attention to it, will feel like more painful than it needs to. And if we can look towards where we're suffering and get with it and really commune with it, we stop suffering. We don't have to feel that anymore. And the most important and beautiful piece of it is that's exactly where you will find your power, because that's what it's trying to show you, is that in here, in looking at those suffering parts and remembering our wholeness, like it's a whole process, sure, but you use that as the guiding factor, it's going to bring you to your purpose. It is the direction that you're seeking. And seeking your purpose is probably the direction we all should be on.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And literally right as you shared that, it just started pouring down rain here. So it hasn't for a while. So I feel like the nature is reflecting, saying, yes, do that, because it may bring up a lot of tears and it'll pass. And there are still clear skies that will come after that. So thank you so much for just taking the time and joining me here today, and everything that you're doing in your life and everything that you've continued to do and are just embodying and then sharing with so many people. It's an honor to connect and just be able to experience you and feel you. And I really look forward to whatever the future holds. And just thanks for being what you are and sharing that with the world.
Thank you. I feel the same. And I just want to appreciate your work as well, because I think it's been really beautiful that in doing this work, I call in people like yourself who, first of all, have similar goals, which is so nice, you know, to be in an echo chamber in that way. It always feels
Yeah.
delicious. But also just to see that men are out there doing the work continues to inspire that hope in me as a
Mhm.
female too, that there is a world we're creating as we do this and as the ripple effects happen that is outstanding. That is absolutely magnificent and something I 100% want to be a part of. I want, you know, like I'm so excited to be here, and the work that you're doing makes that all the more obvious for me, and that's critical for me.
Mm. Well, thank
So
you.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks
have
for
a
having me.
beautiful one. Enjoy the silent retreat that you're in with yourself.
Yeah,
And
I
I'll
am.
see you whenever that is.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Take
Aloha.
care.
Bye.
Bye.